Being able to use few tools and accomplish a lot in the audio industry is a superpower, and I think it's something that every audio engineer and producer should practice. My name's Luke Diamond. I'm an audio engineer and producer, and today we're going to walk through my rough mix process using only 2 plugins to make this into something more like this. And now I know the term rough mix can mean anything, but I do believe that there's a level of polish that should be there while you're making calculated audio decisions for the final mix. Or maybe the artist and the label are in the room and you just want to show them you know what you're doing. Because unless you're running crazy outboard gear, in most cases, you're probably not going to want the artist to be hearing everything back raw. Using tools to their full potential is really, really important, and I'm going to be using Warmy and S-Quick-Strip today from Kiive Audio. I love these plugins because they're super simple to use, and for S-Quick, as the name suggests, it's very quick to dial in some really good sounds. So now we're going to dive into the session, and I'll show you what I did. All right, so really quickly, we'll just go through with everything bypassed just so you can hear what I was working with before. This is kind of my rough fader mix. And then this is what I ended up with. So everything is a little bit more glued together. Everything is a bit cleaner, but not too clean, because a song like this, you can't have it super sterile. It'll probably sound weird. So we're just going to go through and I'm going to explain how I did certain things, and then we'll kind of compare what it sounded like before with it afterwards. So starting with the kick, I started with some Warmy. I cut some of the 200 hertz frequency by almost a dB, and then I boosted right around 4K just to give it more like clickiness, I guess you could say. And then next, moving into Quick Strip, I did add a little bit more to the low mids again, but it was a much like wider band, I think, because it added a lot more of like the 100 like oomph that I wanted. And then we added a little bit of like a high shelf at the end. And then, of course, some light compression to glue it together. And then I added some transient shaper in there, very light amount. It adds a lot, to be honest. Here's the before. Sounds a lot more uniform now. And next we have the snare. So I didn't do anything directly on the snare top mic, but on the bottom, I did a shit ton of compression. I really wanted to bring those snares out, and I think it did a really good job. It's a lot crispier. And then group those together on an aux, and I cut at about 200 again, get rid of some of that boxiness. And then I boosted at around 4K, which is all pretty standard for a snare drum. All right, and moving on to the Quick Strip, I added a little bit of gain with the saturation engage because saturation on snares is sick and it just sounds good. I added a little bit of a high shelf, and then we added some compression and some of the transient adjustment here. This plugin does a whole lot for snare. So this is before. Now we'll engage it. So the snare is now a lot snappier, and you can actually hear the rattle of the snares a lot better, and I really like that. With the rack toms, I really just, again, cut at 200, and I think that's all I did. I think I just cut a little bit of the boxiness out a little bit. And then also with Quick Strip, all I did was cut even more of the low mids because there was a lot going on. And then after the EQ, I added a little bit of compression and then a little bit of that transient design just to get that, like, the actual impact. And then this is before. Lots of resonance. A lot cleaner, a lot more direct. And I'm going to be honest, I think I basically just copied this over. Yeah, it's an exact copy for the floor tom. All right, moving on to the hi-hat. I didn't really do much here. I guess I rolled off the bottom, which probably didn't need to do, but I think I might have accidentally clicked that. Whatever, cool, awesome. It's a cool feature. And then I added some high end there with a high shelf, and then I did crush it with a compressor because I really like hearing like the whole sustain of it sometimes when it's being played like this. It really just allows it to cut through the mix, and I'll kind of play it with everything so you can hear the difference. Off. Before, it was just kind of getting lost, especially on the softer hits, so that's really all we did there. All right, moving on to the overheads. Kind of the same deal here. I did do a cut here because there is some low-end information I wanted to roll off. I added a bunch on the high shelf, almost 2 dB, and then did a dB and a half cut in the low mids as well. Absolutely crushing it. And then I didn't add any transient shaper to this one because this kind of just fills some empty space. I don't want it to be like jarring or anything. This is before. After. Just cuts through a lot more. All right, moving on to the ride. I basically did a lot of the same stuff here. I didn't do any compression here because there is some bleed I didn't want to bring out. But I added a bunch of top end, as per usual, cut some of the low mids and some of the lows because there actually is some hits throughout the song, later in the song. I arguably could just clean these up, and that's really all we did there. Moving on to the overhead in mono. Did a lot here. So we absolutely cranked the gain, added some saturation, rolled off the lows, just to give it some crispy, crunchy saturation. I love how this sounds on room mics and overheads and things like that. We absolutely cranked the compressor as far as it would literally go, and it just sounds really cool. And then I'm pretty sure we just copied and pasted this to all the rooms. I'm going to be honest. Yeah, I literally just copied and pasted all the effects that are on the room mics. Then on the drum bus itself, I did send all the drums to a bus. And for this, I actually just used the drum bus preset that is included with the plugin, and it sounds really good. Like I dialed things in before, and then I was like, oh yeah, there's presets, I should try it. And then I turned this on, and it was much better than mine. So definitely check this one out. Added some gain, high shelf. Actually boosted the lows here too. This is again the preset, but it's just kind of cool because it sounded really good. I turned it on and was like, okay, that's it. That's all we needed. And then the threshold on the comp is just here to get the loudest peaks. And then next we have Warmy on there, and all it's doing is boosting at 4K and boosting at 60. So we're bringing out some of that kick thump, and then we're also bringing out some of the cymbals and the snare and things like that. Before. Especially in that part of the song, it just cuts through a lot better. All right, and moving on to bass, we have a bass amp and a bass DI track. On the amp, we cut quite a bit out of the 200 boxiness just to give it a little bit more definition. And then we also did do a huge boost at 4K just to kind of bring out that picking sound. So I'll show you here. It's bypassed. EQ'd. All right, and then moving on to the quick strip, I added a little bit of gain, engaged the saturation, and then a huge high shelf. And the reason I did this is because I really, really like hearing the picking sound in a bass in the entire mix. And if that gets lost and it kind of just sounds like muddy bass, it kind of just bums me out, man. Like, bassists deserve love too, you know? And then we did a low mid cut again at that like 200 boxiness. It sucks because this is obviously a really wide band. I hate the 200 to 300 hertz region sometimes in bass when it's really overpowering, but the 100, like the 60 to 100 is like chef's kiss. So once you can balance that, you're good. We absolutely cranked the compressor, so it's doing quite a bit. And then again, use the transient knob just to kind of bring out those transients on the picks. That's before. After. All right, now moving on to the bass DI. This is kind of just like a support system for the bass amp, in my opinion. So all we really did here was add some gain, high shelf, bring out some of that picking, and then we crushed it with a compressor so it kind of just sat underneath the other one and we were able to just kind of mix it in. And this is what it sounds like. Before. On. And then together. And this intro guitar I did absolutely nothing with because it just sounded cool. All right, moving on to the rhythm guitars. These are the ones that I would usually pan far left and far right. They were already like this in the stems. So I did group them together and do some group processing, but I do want to go over the individual Warmy EQs I put on here before they got sent to the bus. So all I really did here was cut, again, about 1.5 dB at 200 just to get rid of some of that boxiness, especially since they're going to be out on the sides. I don't want them to be kind of just like occupying all that low mid space. And then I did the exact same thing, copy and paste on the other one. All right, and then moving on to the bus that they're on. So all I really did here was do a low cut, added a high shelf, and then some light compression just to really just tame the peaks. It's very light. And then I just level matched on the way out. Before. After. And then we have this kind of like guitar lead thing here. All I did to this was saturate the heck out of it, do a low cut, huge high shelf, and some transient designer. That's it. I didn't even compress it. There's a lot of reverb going on. We don't want that mess. Before. It's kind of droney. And now it occupies that like high crispiness of the song. I don't know who wrote that part, but that part's awesome. And moving on, we have another lead track. This one's kind of more octaves. It's a little bit more aggressive. I did add some saturation to this. Another high shelf, cut off some of the lows. And then I did a little bit more compression to this one and used transient shaper, and it sounds really cool. Solo it. Before. After. Just a lot more glued together now. And then we have another lead track over here. All I did here is add a little bit of saturation and compress. That's all I did. So this is before. And after. Just evened it out a little bit. And then in the mix. All right, and then moving on, we have this like chorus fuzz track, and this is what it sounds like. Engage quick strip. I cut off some of the lows here, added a bunch of highs, and I did compress it just to... It's basically limited. Just looking at the waveforms, you can kind of see. But I just wanted to add a little bit more of that glue. And this is what it sounds like mixed in. All right, and then we're going to go all the way back up to the top here where I have mix bus processing happening. I'm using the Tighten Up That Low End factory preset, which I thought sounded really cool. I'm just adding a little bit of saturation, a little bit of a gain boost to let that saturation hit. Then we're doing a little bit of a high boost, and then a very, very small little bit of a low mid cut. A little bit of mix bus compression, and then I dialed the saturation mix down quite a bit just to kind of let it be really subtle. This is what it sounded like before. After. And that's really all I did. I mean, these plugins are super easy to use, and I was able to do everything that I did here in like probably 30 minutes. I'm really happy with the results of this. I think it's much more pleasing to the ear. It sounds a little bit more glued together and clean, but not too clean because we obviously didn't want to go for like the sterile style with a song like this. Check out Kiive's plugins at www.kiiveaudio.com. And hey, I'll be seeing you next time. Thanks, Kiive, for having me. And yeah, guys, thanks for watching the video. See you next time.